You don't know who you are.
I'm Leonard Shelby. I'm from San Francisco.
That's who you were. That's not what you become.
Hello, my name is Aaron, and today I would like to talk about nonlinear storytelling. First, we have to ask the question, what is nonlinear storytelling? Nonlinear storytelling is described as events in a particular story occurring out of chronological order, such as parallel plot lines being told at the same time, dream emergence, narrating another story within a main plot line,
She must help me rid ourselves of Angier.
and jumps in time.
I started shooting, so I blasted my way out of there.
However, the technique of simply jumping in time does not necessarily constitute a nonlinear story, such as in the film Boyhood. In the story, we see a young boy named Mason grow up and eventually reach young adulthood. The director, Richard Linklater, tells this story through the use of jumps in time, sometimes several years into the future. But this example of jumping in time is linear since it is always a result of progressing the story further into the future. Now that we've covered a basic concept of nonlinear storytelling, let's talk about perhaps the leading mind behind nonlinear narrative structure in the industry, Christopher Nolan. While not all of his films employ the use of nonlinear storytelling, a majority of them do, arguably the most popular being his most recent film to date, Interstellar, a film consisting of many concepts, one of which is the idea of time and specifically time travel. However, I would like to focus our attention on a film of his which some have not heard of, a lot of which know about, and very few have seen, Memento.
Teddy, don't believe his lies. He is the one. Kill him.
Memento is probably the most prime example of a nonlinear story told on the screen that I've ever seen, which is saying something considering how many movies I've watched. The plot to Memento is rather simple. It's all about a guy named Leonard with short-term memory loss trying to figure out who killed his wife. There's just one thing. Every scene in the film involving the main plot line is played in non-chronological order. That means you get to watch the quote-unquote ending of the story first and the beginning of the story last. The twist here is not really in the narrative of the film, but actually in how the narrative is displayed. By allowing the audience to see the ending of the story first, the question doesn't become who is the killer, but rather how did we end up here? Unlike most linear stories, the mystery that unfolds is not how does it end, but where does it begin? To the credit of Nolan's genius, the question of where does it begin actually becomes the question of how does it end.
No!
On top of all that, between the intercutting of each scene, we are also getting a black and white story of Leonard talking on the phone with someone, telling them about a character named Sammy who has a similar condition to his own. The black and white scenes are clearly flashbacks, but unlike the main story being told, these scenes are told in chronological order. The parallel cutting between this story and the main story gives us a greater understanding of Leonard's condition and provides us with more information of the main plot at the same time.
She really thought she'd call his bluff.
Ouch.
The beauty of Nolan's direction here is that by the end of the film, the main story being told in reverse order and this flashback subplot eventually meet up to give us the ending of the film, or the beginning depending on which way you look at it. Whether the film Memento is brilliant due to Jonathan Nolan's excellent screenplay,
You're talking about these tracks are only a few days old.
Tracks? What are you, Pocahontas?
or Christopher's brilliant direction, or both, the cutting together of this intricate story is a great example of how nonlinear storytelling can be extremely effective. However, not all films that use nonlinear narrative structure use it wisely. Take the film The Captive, for example. This independent film, directed by Anton Migoyan, is about a girl who was abducted at a young age and held captive for years by a strange man while her father desperately searches for her. The film opens with the present day as the girl Cassandra is locked away, now a teenager. We also see the parents, Matthew and Tina, are separated, still mourning the disappearance of their daughter. It's not long before the story jumps back in time to the day of the kidnapping, where Cassandra is young and full of joy. As the story progresses, we keep jumping back and forth in time to see what the present is holding for the characters involved, and the past to see the journey the characters took to reach the point they are at now. The problem is that the jumps are unclear to the audience, leaving us in confusion about the current period of time until we are informed through a line of dialogue or an action halfway into the scene. The transitions happen so fast and with no visual or audio cues that the audience is left to wonder before they're even given a chance to figure it out. In contrast, Nolan uses visual cues in Memento to link each continuation of the non-chronological scenes in order to keep the construct clear and understandable.
I should kill you.
Meanwhile, the rest of The Captive is equally as confusing as its opening scenes, as the narrative jumps from the past to the future and back to the past again, without giving the audience any cues to the jumps. Whether this is on purpose or not, this is just bad storytelling using a nonlinear structure. Director Quentin Tarantino, on the other hand, is another filmmaker like Nolan who uses nonlinear storytelling to his advantage, at least in his earlier films such as Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Like Nolan in Memento, Tarantino uses flashback and parallel storytelling in the film Reservoir Dogs to tell the story of how these men ended up in the situation they are in. By allowing us to see the present first and witnessing the hectic nature of a man losing blood from a bullet wound and the others discussing the current situation they are in, Tarantino lets us cut back to the beginning of the story through each character's narrative arc. He uses nonlinear storytelling to simultaneously give us information on the here and now and the then and there. And he does this in an elegant way that doesn't confuse the audience by using, you guessed it, visual cues. To wrap it all up, whether it's Nolan using this nonlinear technique in movies like The Prestige, where a character reads the journal of another character and a story within a story unfolds, or it's Tarantino using it in Pulp Fiction as a character dies halfway through the story and then reappears for the last portion of the film in an extended flashback, nonlinear storytelling has been used for years. Some directors, like Nolan, are experts at this form of narrative, and other directors not so much. In any case, whether you use nonlinear storytelling or not, all depends on whether your story calls for this technique and how well you can visually construct it in your particular story. Nonlinear narrative can be complicated, but if you do it right, using visual or audio cues, your audience won't be left in the dark. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now,